So naturally, we are going to start with this. Car sales in France are way down. Year over year, car sales, for whatever reason, are way down in France, down by 6%. I don't know exactly why that's happening or what it means, if anything, big picture. I presume it probably sucks for people who sell cars for a living in France. But you know who it really, really sucks for? It really sucks for Tesla. Because while car sales in France are down by 6%, sales of Teslas in France are down by 63%. Not 6%, but 63%. Ooh, I wonder why that is. France is the second largest market for electric cars in all of Europe. So that's really bad for Tesla, down 63%. The only country in Europe that is a larger market than France is Germany. In Germany, Tesla sales are down 59%. In Sweden, Tesla sales are down 44%. In Norway, Tesla sales are down 38%. In the Netherlands, Tesla sales are down 42%. Weird, right? I wonder why that is. Here on this side of the Atlantic, new polling from The Economist and YouGov looks at how Americans feel about the CEO of Tesla, and specifically his involvement in the US government now after he spent so much money to get Donald Trump elected to the presidency. Economist and YouGov took two polls, one right after the election and another one this week, now that Trump's been in office for a couple of weeks. And look at this. Among Republican voters specifically, the proportion of people who wanted Elon Musk to have, quote, a lot of influence in the US government, since the election, it has plummeted by 21 points. We're now down to only about 1 in 4 Republicans wants Elon Musk to have a lot of involvement in the US government. That has just dropped like a stone in a very quick period of time. Among all other Americans who aren't Republicans, the proportion of Americans who like the idea of Elon Musk having a lot of influence in the government, that proportion among Americans who are Democrats is 6%. The proportion among Americans who are independents is 6%. 6%? I mean, he's polling at like tooth decay levels, right? That's like funny bone banged into something sharp levels. Yesterday around noontime, it was 15 degrees in Waterville, Maine, and it was breezy. It's 2 degrees Fahrenheit with the wind chill. But you know what? Temperatures like that, that's nothing for the good, hardy people of the state of Maine, a number of whom felt inspired, even in that weather, to go down to one of the busiest intersections in Waterville, Maine, to go hold a bunch of signs and demonstrate at the Tesla charging station in their town. The Waterville Morning Sentinel reported on the protest, including at least one local resident who saw the protest when she was driving by. She pulled over, parked, jumped out of her car, and decided to join them. Around the same time that was happening up in Maine, down in D.C. at the Department of Labor, this was happening. A short notice protest, and kind of a big one, at the U.S. Department of Labor at their headquarters building. Now, you might remember yesterday, there was a lot of competition for your attention if you were interested in protesting. There were protests in all 50 states, all around the country, including really big ones at places like the Texas State Capitol and Sacramento, California. Yesterday, even just in D.C., there was also a big protest in Washington, just outside the Capitol, for foreign aid and to stand up for USAID. But in addition to all of that, there was also this one at the Labor Department. And again, this one was scrambled together on really short notice, and it was scrambled together on short notice specifically because Elon Musk was coming. People who work at the Labor Department and people who support them and who wanted to stand up for them flooded down to the Labor Department to head off Elon Musk when they got word that Mr. Musk and his little band of teenage flying monkeys that he's been bringing around from government agency to government agency, ripping out the guts of the computer systems. When people found out that they were on their way next to the Francis Perkins building, to the Labor Department headquarters yesterday in Washington, people just ran down there, turned out in force, in person, on no notice, to go try to stop them. Now, this is interesting. We don't know for sure if it was that, Musk and his gang pulled up at the Francis Perkins building and saw the crowd outside. We don't know if it was some other reason, but that reported next stop on Elon Musk's itinerary yesterday afternoon did not happen. It appears that protest turned Musk and his little group of guys, turned them around. And they did not get into the Labor Department systems yesterday, even though they were scheduled to be there. At the same time that was happening, Democracy Forward went to court and filed a lawsuit to block Elon Musk and his freshman 15 from accessing data and systems at the Department of Labor. So we had sort of a 1-2 punch yesterday. You had the physical, direct action of people turning up for that protest at the Labor Department, which appears to have sort of physically turned Elon Musk back, along with his folks. But you also had a court order produced by that lawsuit later that afternoon, which kept them legally blocked from getting into the Labor Department as well. So the Labor Department appears thus far to have escaped what they've been able to do to lots of other agencies. And they appear to have escaped that fate thus far by defending themselves. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, this is what's called making yourself a hard target, right? Making yourself as annoying as possible to go after. In the great in the great proverbial circle of life here, don't be a mouse or a vole. Be a porcupine. Be a poison frog. Be something that sticks in somebody's craw if they try to get you in their mouth. You know what else got blocked today? The resign or else threat from the Trump administration to millions of people who work for the federal government. The administration and this weird and wildly unpopular effort led by his top campaign donor, they've been crowing about how using this gambit, they were going to intimidate 200,000 people who work for the government into quitting by tonight, right? It's going to be by midnight tonight. They were going to get 200,000 people to voluntarily leave the government by being intimidated by this resignation demand. This gambit from the Trump administration and Elon Musk, among other things, appears to be quite illegal, in addition to just sort of clearly being a scam. And I say it appears to be a scam because of what we've had reported, for example, from how people in various government agencies have been briefed about how it will work. One example comes from the Department of Education earlier this week. They had a briefing on this resign or else threat. And at that briefing, employees were advised that if they took this offer and they resigned, as Trump and Musk are demanding they must, if they took this offer and resigned as of midnight tonight, and then thereafter, the Trump administration reneged on their part of the deal and just stopped paying people what they told them they'd get, employees at the Department of Education were told at that point they would have no recourse. They would, quote, waive all legal claims. One person who was part of that briefing at the Education Department told NBC News, quote, it sounded like a commercial for a used car dealership. Like, act now, one day only. Yeah. And hope you don't want to resell that used car if it's a Tesla, because that market is tanked. Whew, doesn't look like it's coming back either. But the resign or else deadline for people who work for the government, that deadline was supposed to be tonight at midnight. It's now not, because that too has been blocked by a federal judge. A key component of that threat from Trump and Musk was this apparently unenforceable promise that if people quit because of this demand, they'd be paid their salary anyway for several months. That promise itself appears to be illegal, pretty plainly, under federal law, because the government can't promise to spend money that it does not have allocated for that purpose. Well, it does, as I say, appear pretty plainly to be illegal, but now a federal judge will test it while the whole stunt is legally blocked. You know what else got blocked today? Another one. Again, this was Trump's day one declaration that he is canceling the constitutional provision that says if you're born here, you're an American. Today, again, we got yet another judge blocking that gambit by Trump. This was a judge appointed by Ronald Reagan who was just blistering in his ruling and about what Trump is trying to do here. Quote, the rule of law is, according to him, meaning according to Trump, something to navigate around or simply ignore, whether that be for political or personal gain. The judge said in his ruling, quote, there are moments in the world's history where people look back and ask, where were the lawyers? Where were the judges? In these moments, the rule of law becomes especially vulnerable. I refuse to let that beacon go dark today. Got a federal judge appointed by Ronald Reagan. He's been on the bench for decades, and with those sort of stirring words today, he ordered Trump's birthright citizenship gambit blocked. You know what else got blocked today? The Trump and Musk gambit that turned out these thousands of people at the Treasury building this week to protest. The news that Trump had let his top campaign donor inexplicably access the payment system at the U.S. Treasury that sends out everything from your Social Security check to your tax refund to everything else the government pays for. That news in particular had caused pretty understandable and pretty widespread freakout in this country. First among Treasury employees, including the acting Treasury Secretary, somebody who's been employed at the Treasury Department for decades, who's a career, nonpartisan civil servant. He tried to stop them from getting their hands on this payment system, and then he resigned when he couldn't stop them. But it caused a big freakout inside Treasury. It also caused a significant freakout among members of Congress. It also caused a significant freakout among members of the public. We know that in part because members of Congress have been telling the press this week that as the numbers of phone calls to House and Senate offices have skyrocketed over this past 2 weeks, with people complaining about Trump's actions and demanding that their members of Congress and their senators stand up and do whatever they can to stop Trump. A significant proportion of the calls they've been getting, according to members of Congress, are, quote, panicked calls from regular Americans, specifically about this thing at Treasury, about the payment system at Treasury being handed over to Elon Musk's little unsupervised playgroup. And this was made worse, frankly, when Trump's newly confirmed Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, assured everybody repeatedly that the access that he had allowed Elon Musk and his team to this particularly sensitive payment system at the Treasury, he assured everybody that their access to the system was read-only, meaning that they weren't even trying to use their access to the system to cut off any payments of any kind. They'd never even had that in mind. Well, despite those assurances from Scott Bessent, reporting in the Washington Post and in the New York Times and in the Associated Press and elsewhere would now seem to indicate that Scott Bessent was either lying or wrong when he gave everybody those assurances that their access was, quote, read-only. In fact, according to this recent reporting, from the very outset, from their very first demands to get access to that incredibly sensitive system that partisan actors have never before had access to, Elon Musk's people made clear that the reason they wanted access to that system was specifically because they intended to use it to stop funds from going out. On their own say-so. Funds they thought shouldn't go. So we're starting to get a sense, 2.5 weeks into this new Trump term, about the fact that pushback definitely works, but the different forms that pushback can take. So, like in this case with the Treasury payment system, we get direct action, we get a big, impressive, basically impromptu protest organized on very short notice at the Treasury. We get Treasury officials doing what they can to stop what they're trying to do and then sounding the alarm about why they resigned when they weren't able to stop it. We get regular Americans calling their members of Congress and blowing their stacks about this. We then get Democratic members of Congress blowing their stacks and going to the protest and calling press conferences and demanding answers from the administration. We get the press blowing up, the press doing reporting and blowing up this calm down, nothing to see here, apparent set of lies from the administration about what in fact they have been up to with this scheme at Treasury. All these different forms of pushback. And now, hello, as of today, we get a federal judge throwing down a court order and blocking them from doing anything inside the Treasury payment system. Pushback works. But pushback also has a lot of different ways that it can work. And here's one that I think has pretty unpredictable implications in the days ahead. Because in the midst of that drama today over this Treasury payment system, we also got this delightful advance in this story from the Wall Street Journal, which exclusively reported that the actual kid, the actual person who Donald Trump and Elon Musk had let into the Treasury payment system, the actual person is this person. Quote, a key DOJ staff member who gained access to the Treasury Department's central payment system resigned today after he was linked to a deleted social media account that advocated racism and eugenics. A 25-year-old who is part of a cadre of Elon Musk lieutenants deployed by DOJ to scrutinize federal spending resigned after the Wall Street Journal asked the White House about his connection to the account. The account posted in July, quote, just for the record, I was racist before it was cool. The account wrote on Twitter in September, quote, you could not pay me to marry outside of my ethnicity. In reference to a post noting the prevalence of people from India in Silicon Valley, the account wrote, again in September, quote, normalize Indian hate. After the Wall Street Journal inquired about the account, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt said that the young man had resigned from his role. Again, this is one of the Elon Musk lieutenants, one of his bad news bears, who specifically was allowed access to the most sensitive payment system in the entire U.S. government, the one that sends out more than 90% of all payments for all things from the United States Treasury. This was that specific kid. And here's my favorite part of this reporting from the Wall Street Journal. After this, the Wall Street Journal uncovers what this kid has said. I was racist before it was cool. You could not pay me to marry outside my ethnicity. Normalize Indian hate. After the Wall Street Journal turns up that stuff from this kid, the Journal then does, there's then an interview, with Bloomberg, in which Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, quote, defended the work of DOJ employees appended to the Treasury Department, describing them as, quote, highly trained professionals. That's why he gave them access to the most sensitive payment system in the entire U.S. government that partisan political actors have never had access to before in the history of this country. It's because he checked. They're highly trained professionals. Normalize Indian hate. At Wired tonight, we learn about another of Elon Musk's JV team, these highly trained professionals that are very trusted by the U.S. Treasury Secretary. It's from Wired.com tonight, quote, a young technologist known online as Big Balls, who works for Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOJ, has access to sensitive U.S. government systems. Highly trained professionals. However, his professional and online history call into question whether he would pass the background check typically required to obtain security clearances, according to security experts who spoke with Wired. Quote, one of the companies he founded, which is called Tesla.Sexy LLC, controls dozens of web domains, including at least 2 that are registered in Russia. One of those domains, which is still active, offers a service called Healthy, which is an AI bot for Discord servers targeting the Russian market. Someone using a Telegram handle linked to the young man also solicited a cyber attack for hire service in 2022. At Path Network, the young man worked as a systems engineer. Path has at times listed as employees Eric Taylor, also known as Cosmo the God, a well-known former cyber criminal and member of the hacker group UG Nazis, as well as Matthew Flannery, an Australian convicted hacker whom police allege was a member of the hacker group LulzSec. So these are the highly trained professionals. That was the exact phrase from Trump Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. This is the team that he's decided it's totally fine to give them complete access to the highest security systems in the whole US government, including the ones that have your social security number, your personal identifying information, your bank account information, potentially your health information. They're highly trained professionals. Why wouldn't they be given everything? CNN reports tonight, quote, a 23-year-old representative from Elon Musk's Doge was granted access to the Energy Department's IT system yesterday by Energy Secretary Chris Wray. This despite objections from people in the Department of Energy, which controls access to information about U.S. nuclear weapons. I don't know if you worry about nuclear weapons. I don't know. I don't know if you worry about the safety of your social security number and your bank account. I mean, everybody has their own, things that keep them up at night, right? Did you ever worry about, air traffic control? Our nation's new transportation secretary, who until a few weeks ago was a weekend host on the Fox Business Channel, he announced today that this crew, operated by Elon Musk, this is the group to whom he's handing over the national system that we have in the United States for air traffic control. He's letting them, quote, plug in to the system to fix it, because who among us doesn't feel better about having a 19-year-old with links to Russia and famous criminal hackers who goes by the online handle Big Balls in charge of American air traffic control? Anybody want to buy a used Tesla? Today in Washington, people protested against USAID cuts, and specifically against cuts for the PEPFAR program that has literally kept tens of millions of people alive with HIV treatment. These folks blocked traffic in Washington, D.C. They told Secretary of State Marco Rubio to reverse the halt to PEPFAR, reverse the halt to this program. Now, Marco Rubio has tried to say that this particular program isn't being halted, but it absolutely is. Activists and journalists have proven that out, even as Marco Rubio and the Trump administration have tried to say that this is one of the programs they're going to let live. This program is halted. And whether it is intentional by them or whether it is because they cannot tell which direction they are walking on an escalator and they can't figure out how to restart something they accidentally stopped, it is now down to activists in the street who are using everything they've got to get that program restarted, including risking arrest today and stopping traffic in the streets. It also includes a somewhat random overture from a billionaire. Billionaire Microsoft founder Bill Gates was at the White House yesterday afternoon lobbying President Trump personally and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles personally to restart that program and to save USAID. All different forms of pressure to try to push them back. And so is the new federal lawsuit that we can report is being filed tonight to stop the Trump administration from illegally closing USAID. The Congressional Research Service reported earlier this week that there is not a legal means available to Donald Trump to shut that agency down, with or without Elon Musk and his band of juvenile delinquents trying to do it. But they are nevertheless trying. And so now we see with USAID and foreign aid and everything else, we see everybody else who understands the stakes here pushing back in every way, on every front, every day. This fight is joined, and we're going to get some expert advice on the prospects for success. Next.